Let's get the double entendres out of the way. I loved Cock top to bottom. Cock was deep, thrilling, and satisfying. Cock made me want to squeal with delight. I cannot get enough of Mike Bartlett's Cock. I loved it so much I went back for more Cock. A cock in the hand is worth two in the bush. Wait, no, I think maybe that's a single entendre. This quote comes from a review published on mildlybitter.com. I chose this quote to start us off not only because it is extremely humorous, but also because it shows that many people look at the title of this play and think that it is going to be about extremely sexual themes, where actually the title is just a shortened word from a cock and bull story, or to represent a cockfight. So my purpose of this speech is to open your eyes to some themes, to a few themes that are present in Cock by Mike Bartlett. To prepare for this speech, I read Cock by Mike Bartlett multiple times and researched interviews and reviews with Mike Bartlett and directors of the play. My three themes that I chose were sexuality, the theme of power, and the theme of indecision, which can be clearly seen in the character of John. Let us first review the theme of sexuality. My first piece of evidence is from an interview with Barbara Anderlich, who directed Cock at East West Theater. This is what she had to say about John's sexuality. Of course, the fact that John gets involved with W makes him question his sexuality, but at the same time, he's also distancing himself from this idea that he has to choose or declare what he is. As he says at one point during the play, he thinks it is more important who he loves than what he loves. I chose this quote because it shows how sexuality, or lack thereof, is present in John's life and in his choices, and in the choices he is required to make. In a review of the production done during the Midsummer Festival, Robert Reed described his opinion on John's sexuality. I spent the entire show feeling with John that he might be either, neither, or both, that who he loves is not about gender, but about the people. I chose this quote because it describes how John's sexuality does not specifically matter as much as the person that he loves matters. My final quote for the theme of sexuality comes from the play when M talks to John and he says, "You want your boyfriend's help with the woman you're sleeping with." This quote demonstrates the emphasis M puts on woman, bringing into question if John's portrayal of homosexuality is more upsetting than the actual portrayal of monogamy. So with all that said, my question for you to ponder is, would M have reacted differently if John had cheated with a man instead of a woman? Now I will introduce the theme of power dynamics in relationships. Caleb Triscari discusses the power dynamics in relationships in a review about the production at the Midsummer Festival. He says, Emma switches from doting to cold in a heartbeat, depending on John's fondness of him at the time. It is a symptom typical of an emotionally abusive relationship, bringing to light the fact that any relationship can turn toxic. I chose this quote because it clearly demonstrates the power that M holds over John during the play. My second piece of evidence comes from a review written by David Cope, and it reveals a certain power held by John over himself. The quote says, "John loves being loved, even if it drives his paramours into violent agonies." This quote demonstrates the power John holds over himself for him to find love wherever he can. The final quote for the theme of power comes from the play when M points out the toxicity in the relationship. He says, "That's never been how we worked, never. But of course you've started, of course, making up fictitious and highly optimistic myths about our wonderful relationship, which had since passed, about how fantastic things used to be, and I'm sorry to disillusion you so soon into our reconciliation, but we were not happy all the time. We rarely spoke to each other without doing something else, and we always, John, we argued all the time." This quote shows the toxicity and power M holds over John, especially because John's next line is, "I don't agree." So my question for the theme of power is John aware of the power M might hold over him? Why or why not? Finally, the theme of indecision will be introduced. A review of COC was done by The Conversation. It discussed the idea of John's indecisiveness. John is tirelessly indecisive, some have suggested infuriatingly so, as he continues relationships with both M and W, telling them both the same story, that he will leave the other to be with them. The play culminates in an uncomfortable dinner party where both M and W, it seems, will stop at nothing to win John over, from using emotional blackmail to cheesecake. I chose this as my first piece of evidence because it refers clearly to the theme of indecisiveness and how John refuses to make a choice. A review by Sam Brooks brought more attention to the theme of indecision. John has to make a decision, even though he doesn't particularly want or feel capable of it. The play drives towards this moment with such a force that the final moments of the show can feel like a cheat, but in a way that feels completely conscious and intentional. This quote gives us more insight into how John shows indecision throughout the show. Finally, my quote from the book is spoken by John. He says, "If you really think about it, tonight could change everything. I turned one way, I have children and a normal family. I turn the other way, and I'll always be wondering if I made the right decision. Our whole lives turn on tonight." This quote shows us why John is indecisive. My question for indecision is, what and why would John's decision be if he didn't struggle with indecision? And now, after introducing those three themes, I invite you all to interact in a dialogue. So the first question